Turning points change the course of our lives, whether it's a big decision, overcoming an obstacle or tragedy, or taking a leap of faith. These stories of inspiration and resilience are what Turning Point is all about. Hello, everyone, and welcome to a special episode of Turning Point. I'm your host, Priya Sam. And if you are watching this, you'll see an addition to my background today with my Fanshawe banner. Fanshawe College is one of our sponsors this season. I actually graduated from the broadcast journalism program at Fanshawe College in 2006. It marked a major turning point in my life, so this partnership is such a perfect fit. Now, the interview you're about to hear is with the first Canadian ever to win Survivor. Erika Casupanan is also a Fanshawe alum. She graduated from the multimedia program at Fanshawe. This interview was recorded during a live event on January 26th, 2022. Erika, welcome to Turning Point, and a huge congratulations to you on your big win.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much for having me.
It's such a pleasure to have you. I know everyone is dying to hear everything about Survivor. So we're going to get to that. But, you know, one of the things I thought during our pre-interview was you had such a great story before Survivor ever happened. So let's start there, because on the show, we do learn a little bit about your background. It's very obvious that family is very important to you. And your parents immigrated to Canada with you when you were very young. So tell me more about them and about your childhood.
Yeah, I moved to Canada when I was young. I think it was the early 90s. So even though I was born in the Philippines and being Filipino was such a big part of growing up, I can only remember having grown up in Canada. And I think that growing up as an immigrant and, you know, with an immigrant family, it was interesting to see because my older brother and I were born in the Philippines, and then my younger brother and sister had moved to Canada. And throughout the whole time, I feel like my parents were going through that adjustment period where you come to this country and you want to build this new life for your family. But then you also have so much hardship at the beginning because you're not often afforded the same opportunities that you had in your home country. So you have to do a lot of work to work your way up. And I think a lot of times with immigrant families, and my parents included, it involved a lot of shift work or work that their value was their time. So my parents worked a lot when I was a kid, and my brothers and my sister, we had my grandparents who were there to live with us, raise us. I think that they were like our babysitters. We considered them like a second set of parents. And we're so lucky that we had that close relationship with our grandparents. And at the same time, because we had so much time at home, we had so much free time, we were kind of exploring the world and figuring it out. I became so into watching TV. I became so into movies and to the internet. I think as soon as we got dial up, you could not peel me off of the computer. So I, from a young age, became so interested in pop culture and the stories that they had told us. And I think that, you know, that mix of being an immigrant, trying to kind of figure myself out, trying to figure out how I fit in into this world where I look a bit different with everyone, and also taking in so much different pop culture and so much mass storytelling. I think that it led to me being quite curious and quite critical of everything around me, and also having this kind of desire to adventure on my own and tell stories on my own.
It's so interesting that all of this started at such a young age for you, because I know I mentioned it in the introduction there, but you actually took the multimedia design and production program at Fanshawe. And it sounds like this interest in that industry really started for you at a young age.
It really did. I remember even in high school, I was, you know, trying to figure out what I wanted to do. I don't know if I want to do English. I don't know if I want to go to school and study, who knows what. I felt like there were all these things that I was really interested in, but I couldn't quite articulate what that looked like. And I think I was really lucky when I was in high school. I had a really great teacher who introduced me to communications technology and to Photoshop and to broadcasting and even to like desktop publishing and print design and all sorts of stuff, where I realized I could be the creator of media as well as the consumer of it. And then when it came time to figure out what I wanted to do in terms of post-secondary education, I actually looked at the joint program between Western and Fanshawe, where I did the media information technoculture program at Western, and at the same time did the Fanshawe multimedia program. And I realized, you know, the double duty of being able to really understand the theory behind things and the strategy behind things, but also be able to really take ownership and build things and be the creator of things. Like, it really hit the sweet spot for what I was interested in. And, all these weird childhood interests I had that I thought were so weird and weren't any value, I realized that there was the perfect place for them.
It's so, yeah, as you're talking about this, the program I did was I was also in the Western and Fanshawe Collaborative Program. And so a lot of what you're saying is really resonating with me, because I think the technical skills and the practical skills that I learned at Fanshawe became so valuable in the workplace after. And I don't think it's something you necessarily realize until you're in it and then you're applying for jobs after. So tell me about that experience and kind of how Fanshawe prepared you for your career.
Yeah. So after I graduated from Western and Fanshawe, then I did more school, because who doesn't love learning? So I went and I did the public relations program at Humber College. And when it came time for me to start applying for internships, I found for me the real differentiator that a lot of hiring managers found appealing about me was because I had that practical multimedia background that a lot of the other students didn't have. So I think that for me, I was in this position where I could think about what I wanted to do. And I had also already, through going to Fanshawe, been empowered to really make things happen and practically, take ideas and know how to produce them and take them across the finish line. And I think even when I was in the PR industry and it was a lot of writing, knowing that now everything is so intertwined, I was always having to work with designers. I was always having to work with other agencies. And I think that having the background I had in multimedia design had now empowered me to really have ownership and also have confidence in being able to navigate through all these crazy integrations and know that when it came time to working on a complicated project, I knew what I was doing.
I did spend some time on your LinkedIn, and you had an incredible career in communications. You worked for companies like Google, PlayStation, Fedora, most recently Kijiji. On this show, you mentioned that you're no stranger to being estimated. So I'm curious, you were obviously in some pretty big boardrooms here with these companies. So what did that look like during your communications career?
I feel like the journey of being underestimated, I feel like there's so many different examples of what that looks like. But I also feel like for people who have been underestimated routinely, the journey is always the same. I found that often, since I looked so young, I know I have a higher voice. I also have chosen to just not look the way that one traditionally would. So I've had my purple hair for a long time. I don't really wear blazers, except today I'm wearing one because it's pink and there are snakes and chickens on him. And I feel like being in the workplace and wanting to do the right thing, but also not quite wanting to conform would, create weird situations for me. So it was a lot of, I would make a decision on something or input on something, and somebody would then decide that they had to go to my manager instead, even though I perfectly had the authority to do something. Or, people would invite me to come and collaborate on something, but then realizing they actually only wanted me to be there to say yes and to bring something across the finish line. And it wasn't necessarily about truly having my input. And I think that through working at so many different places, the important thing for me was really finding mentors, because I feel like, these instances, they happen more regularly than they should happen. But what helped me was having mentors who understood the experience that I was going through. And then they were able to, one, let me know that I wasn't crazy. And then two, give me some advice and give me some feedback in terms of how I can really continue to take ownership and continue to be confident about what I could bring to the table.
I think what you just said there is an experience that so many people who are with us tonight will resonate with. As a person of color in the workplace, it can be really isolating when there aren't other people like you around. And that, I know that feeling well, of feeling like there was a microaggression or an inappropriate comment made, but then not having somebody else to talk to about it. And then wondering, like, am I being overly sensitive, or, am I like overthinking this, or did I misinterpret that comment? So I know you mentioned having mentors was really helpful. Was there anything else that helped you out in some of those difficult situations?
It largely came down to having community. So I would have mentors, people who had a few more years of work under their belt. But then also I would talk to people who were my peers. I would talk to people who were earlier in their career, and we would just share experiences. And I think that the power of just talking to someone and realizing, okay, it's not just me. I'm not crazy. This has happened to you. I feel like having that validating experience, that in itself really helps you to then decide to choose to be confident as you move forward. And I think that throughout everything, it's important to make sure you find that community of people who's willing to hear you out. And they're also willing to support you and let you know that you're not alone.
I think this finding allies and people who support you also carries through to your time on Survivor. So perfect tee up there. Let's talk about Survivor, because it became part of your life when you were just 11 years old. So why was it so impactful for you as a child?
When Survivor came out, it was unfortunately the first season premiered around the time that my grandpa has passed away. So I had said earlier, my grandparents were such a big part of my life. And as a kid, it's really hard to wrap your head around that loss, right? I had never known someone who had passed away before. And my grandpa was so crucial to the rhythms of my family that it really disrupted my family life, because then we have to figure out childcare and who's picking up who and all of this stuff. And then at the same time, my parents would take some time off to work, but then they quickly had to go back to work. So then they weren't able to be as available to really support us as much as I know that they wish they could have. So when Survivor came on, it became this escape for me. It was the first reality show I had seen. I mean, it's one of the first reality shows ever. I had never seen anything like it. And I saw these people in these crazy circumstances and still managing to figure out what they're going to eat, or figure out how they're going to, build their rules and build their society and their etiquette. And then eventually they're overcoming these challenges and they get to the end and somebody wins. And I remember getting so much inspiration and so much strength from this and seeing, okay, if these people are able to do this, then what am I able to do? And even though for the majority of the show's tenure, Canadians were not eligible to play, I think that I was a little crazy, because I would always tell myself if I was doing something hard or if I was in the middle of the tough part of a workout that, oh, this is going to be so easy compared to what you deal with on Survivor. I think I just always had it in my head that it was going to happen.
I love that even then, even as a kid, like you had this idea in your head. And that is, I think it's really cool now. What a perfect, like, full circle story that this show was such a big part of your life when you were a kid. Tell me about the moment you found out you were going to be on it, because now you've kind of set it up. You've been thinking about this for more than a decade.
Yeah, I feel like for me, there were so many big moments of finding out news in my journey because COVID just made everything so much longer. So I actually applied for the show in October 2018, and that was as soon as Canadians were eligible to compete. And then I didn't hear anything back. So I thought, okay, I'll apply again. I'll just go on with my life. And then over a year later, when I started making a new video, I got an email from casting in response to my original video. And I remember I was coming home from the gym, and I actually had a moment where I dropped my grocery bags because I couldn't believe that it had happened. And then it was so fun because I go on the roller coaster of going through the casting process for the show. I end up getting the call in February 2020 saying that I was going to film the show in March 2020. And I remember that was a moment where my friend was over, my sister was over, everyone is just collapsed and crying. And it was so joyful. And then another big call was actually a few days before we were going to leave to film. We were told that since COVID has now become a pandemic, it's off. We have to delay it. And then I had a few months of other, disappointing calls where, okay, we're going to push it back. We're going to push it back. And then finally in fall of 2020, we find out, okay, we can't film it this year. We can't guarantee everyone is back on the cast. Unfortunately, we're going to have to see what happens next year. So then that's a devastating part of the experience, thinking, oh my goodness, COVID has taken away my biggest dream ever. So then once I got called again to film in 2021, I was excited, but then I'm also apprehensive because I think, especially when we think about how we've lived, where we get things and then we get them taken away again, or that we can go to a restaurant. Okay, not anymore. So I think I was so used to things kind of solidifying, but then kind of going away. So It honestly wasn't until the very first day of filming when we're on that boat, all the cameras are on us, and then Jeff says, "Welcome to Survivor 41." It wasn't until that moment that I actually believed we were finally going to do this. I felt like I had run a marathon and I made it to the finish line, but then turns out the marathon's just beginning because then it's time to play.
Okay. I mean, I can't imagine what it was like to live that, because just hearing you recount that story, I feel like I went on the roller coaster with you. That is a lot of ups and downs, a lot of emotion. And also there was a change for you, because when you were first, when you got that first call and were planning to go, you had a leave of absence from work approved, right?
Yes. Yes.
And then the second, when everything actually ended up happening, you took a different path. You decided to quit your job. So tell me about that and making that decision.
I think that with COVID, I think it made a lot of people reevaluate. And I feel like for me, I was at home, I was doing communications, and I did a lot of issues management communications at my job. So when something bad would happen, basically I would be the one to come in to figure out what to do. And of course, with the pandemic, there was something bad happening every day. So I felt like I was on this hamster wheel of constantly responding to crises. And I feel like I learned a lot from that. And I think a lot of that helped me in Survivor. But at the same time, I think that after a year of that, and also a year of just, being at my apartment, not being able to do the things I want to do, and you're just kind of in your head, just thinking about everything. By the time Survivor came knocking on my door again, I thought, okay, am I going to go do this crazy adventure that I've always dreamed of and then come back to my apartment and get back onto the hamster wheel of crises? Or why don't I just fully commit to the adventure? Why don't I just say goodbye to this chapter of my life, put my full self out there, and then see what happens next? And I think that allowing myself to do that really helped me in the game, because I removed so many expectations about myself, about who I am based on my career and the level I was at. And, all of that stuff that doesn't matter. And I was able to really be my raw self out there.
Wow. I mean, I think I know a lot of people, and by the way, for everyone listening and watching right now, you can submit questions for Erika. A lot of people submitted questions ahead of time, Erika, and a lot of them asked about this decision, like, how did you decide to quit your job? So it's so interesting to hear your thought process, and especially now that you can kind of reflect back. Obviously, you did win. So I want to kind of take a trip through the journey, because you're on this island for 26 days. We only get 14 hours of episodes after. So, obviously a lot happens that we didn't get to see. And we don't see a lot of you in the earlier episodes, especially. So I wonder if you can tell us a little bit about what you remember about the first days.
So the first days, it was fun being on the Luvu tribe, to be honest. And I think that it was almost crazy how good we were in challenges. There was somebody on our tribe who was good at everything. So when it came to pretty much any challenge, we were stacked. And I think that because of that, there are some times where I think back, okay, what happened the first few days? And it almost felt like we were just at this camp, and every now and then we would go and play a game and then come back and keep doing our chores at camp. But I think that, it gave us some practice in terms of playing the game, because before any challenge, we would go out there and we would strategize and we would figure out, okay, since we know that this is how this advantage works, what should we do? Or if we know that it looks like this tribe is voting out this type of person or these people, what do we do? And we would strategize, and then we would never vote. So it was also kind of like we were in this weird purgatory where I was on Survivor, but then I felt like I wasn't really playing Survivor. I think that for me, one of the biggest things that happened when we were in our pre-merge was the relationship I had built with Heather. So Heather was a 52-year-old mom from South Carolina. She has always lived in South Carolina, and I am a purple-haired Filipino immigrant who lives in the biggest city in Canada. And we were able to really find common ground. Our first conversation where we really bonded, it was about how, so spoiler, I'm nowhere close to getting married, and Heather got married later than most people would in her community. So we had talked about how, what it feels like to really not abide by the timeline that you think you should as a woman. And we were able to find common ground that way. And I think because of that, we were able to build this relationship where we truly came to care and love each other. And I feel like that's so rare in a game like Survivor that was so deceitful. And then because of that, we had this relationship that was able to withstand the game. And we're still great friends now. And I think that had I not had the time on Luvu to build that relationship, I think that the game could have gone quite differently for both of us.
It was, and I know this came out in the show too, such an unlikely friendship, but also you could tell that there really was this deep respect between the two of you. So it's really neat to hear now, to hear you say that it started so early on. And it sounds like it kind of happened organically too.
Oh, 100%. I think that we were gathering firewood. I think we were gathering twigs because we needed small wood. And then we just ended up having this conversation and realized that we are a lot more alike than one would think. And I mean, Heather struggled. We saw that Heather struggled in a challenge in the first little bit. And then I ended up being a big support system for her at that point. And then when I was exiled, Heather was actually the only one who was running around telling people to give me a chance and to not quite can't count me out yet and to meet me before deciding to vote me out. So I knew that even when I wasn't there, Heather had my back, and it really became something real. And I'm glad that towards the end of the series, people got to see that.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned the time that you were in exile. This is in episode 6. You spent 2 days by yourself. This is really where we get to know you in the show. And this one line really stuck with me. You said in one of the clips there, it's been a dream to be on Survivor. And it's like a love letter to my parents to let them know that everything they did gave me what I need to survive out here. I just love that moment in hearing you say, you know, how important your family is to you. It sounds like you were feeling really reflective in your time there.
Yeah. When you read that line, even I get teary-eyed and I'm thinking, whoa, I'm the one who said that when I was starving. Like, wow. I think that moment on Exile, it was the culmination of so many things. Like, sure, it's a big point in the game, but then when you think about the pandemic, having been cast for Survivor and then being told that it's delayed and then being back on, but then not knowing for sure and having quit my job. So there's so much that I already have brewing before the game even starts. And then at that point, we had been on Luvu I knew I was at the bottom. We had never voted. And the day before that, what the audience didn't see is I actually, in one of my confessionals, started going on about, how are any of us supposed to win here? How are any of these other tribes supposed to believe that these people who have been safe the whole time should deserve to win against these tribes who have been voting the whole time? And I'm thinking, do these people realize how bad of positions we're in right now? Like, we have to do a lot of work to be able to get the credibility to win. So then, and I kept saying, all I need to do is get to the merge. All I need to do is get to the merge. And then lo and behold, the next day I am on an island by myself and everyone has merged without me. So I think that there was just so much brewing inside of me. And then I am not an outdoors person at all. I think that in terms of camping, I've only ever gone where there's a guide who does all the outdoorsy stuff. And I just say, please and thank you. So I was not prepared to live like that at all. And then having put together my little, not shelter, because it wasn't a shelter, it was like an area I slept in, put together my area, created the fire pit for myself, made the fire, put the rice on it. And it was the first rice that I had all game. It was just a lot. It just all came out. And I actually just immediately sat on the ground and started bawling my eyes out because I think it was just too much. And I think because of that, and because I was just forced to face all of these things that I was worried about and face my fears of living on exile, I think it was really easy for me at that point to get to just start to be really raw and think truly about not just my life in the game, but then my life outside of everything. And I think I was able to almost return to myself and figure out, you know, who I really am and where I really came from and what that meant for this moment.
Yeah, I mean, it's really like, it does feel, there's obviously this big shift that happens at this point. And I think you can feel it as you're watching too, but just hearing everything that was going through your head here, it really kind of makes this moment even more significant. And obviously, as we discuss this piece, we have to talk about the hourglass because while winning Survivor is your biggest turning point, this is like a turning point within a turning point because it was your turning point on the show. I think everyone who's here would agree. Can you take me through your decision-making process here?
Yeah. So for the hourglass, I mean, to be honest, as soon as Jeff handed me that thing and explained what it was, I started reaching for the hammer. I think that Jeff actually had to swap my hand away. It was a really easy decision. And I think that since I was so aware of where I stood socially in the game, I knew that Heather was my ally. I knew that the people on Luvu were unlikely to be trying to protect me behind my back. And I knew that for me, I really needed to build relationships outside of my original tribe. So when you look at the two groups of people, one that you could keep safe and one you could put at risk, one was primarily my original tribe, one was a bunch of new people that I haven't met before. And then also one decision would lead to my safety. I think it was a pretty easy decision for me to decide to smash it. But I think that in terms of really the turning point that I had while I was on exile, I think that what really came to head after I cried my eyes out, I cried a lot. I feel like they had a lot of crying content of me. So I'm sure that they could probably put together like a full series of just me crying. They think that, I had quit my job. And a job like PR is so focused on how things should look and how you should be. And then I go on Survivor. I end up not voting at all in the pre-merge. So I'm in a good position in terms of being safe. But then I knew that I was just in such at that point, I don't want to say bad position because I don't think any position is bad. It's a matter of how you work on it. But it's like, I knew that it was going to be hard for me to climb up. And then I was afraid to be on exiled and then I was there and I was getting through it. And I think that I was so upset about how the game was going for me because I had thought about what a winning Survivor game should look like. And I felt like I was behind. And what I really let go of on exile was the expectations for what it means to be a winner, what the winning game looks like. Because I realized it doesn't all have to look the same. It doesn't have to be pretty. I should be able to set for myself whatever my winning game is going to look like. So I think that when I broke the hourglass, I also had broken these crazy expectations for me. And then I think that also helped me in the second half of the game too.
As someone who watched the show for so long, like as you're walking me through all of this, obviously you had had so much time to think about your strategy and how you wanted to play this game. But it sounds like once you're actually there, there's only so much you can control and so much planning, I guess, you can do in advance. Is that fair to say?
100%. I think that everybody who got cast on everyone who got cast on Survivor 41 is a big fan. We've all dreamt about how we want to play. I think everybody has their game plan. But the thing is, number one, the game is designed to be crazy. For example, there's never been something like the hourglass before. And then you also don't know what it's like with all the other people. And I think that I had really underestimated how crazy it was going to be to live with so many different personalities. Like, I'm the only one living in Canada who was on that show. So I was the only one who lived in a whole other different country. So I think that what makes Survivor so interesting is it's not a game of chess because there are things that to you could seem like they're perfectly logical, make a lot of sense, but then you realize everybody is working from a different type of logic. So something that makes perfect sense to you would be something that someone else would never consider. And then the game itself, it's always like Jeff is shaking it up. So you really never have your footing. And I think that the people who do well are the ones who are able to really be flexible and accept whatever gets thrown at them.
Yeah, it's interesting how you said, that's what you were doing in your PR career as well. And it sounds like a lot of that and just a lot of your earlier life as well really prepared you well for being in this situation and for all of the different things that were thrown at you.
Yeah, 100%. I think that growing up in an immigrant household and then being in I guess I am an immigrant, even though I spent most of my time in Canada. I think that you pick up this resourcefulness where you know that you come into life with a certain set of tools that might look different than everybody else's, but you have to figure out how to work with them. And I'm somebody who started working as soon as I was 14 years old. I think that I have been working steadily from 14 until I quit my job to be on Survivor. So it's also been crazy the last few months having a bit of a different change of pace. But I think that having all of that mixed in and feeling different types of stakes. And then you have to come to realize that you yourself have enough strength within you and you have enough know-how to get through whatever gets thrown at you.
Yeah, and there really was so much thrown at you. And aside from, the physical challenges and kind of all of the twists, this season felt very different in some other ways too, because the topics of race, discrimination, allyship came up a lot this season. It led to these really emotional and really impactful moments. I feel like it's something we haven't seen in a lot of other seasons. So I wonder, how did this impact you personally while you were there?
I feel like often as POCs, you don't want to be the one talking about how you're different. You don't want to be the one talking about how you have a different experience or how things are harder. You want to fit in and you want to be quote unquote normal. And I think that if it was a season where it was before the CBS diversity mandate, where it continued to be a minority in terms of the number of POCs, I don't know if we would have had those same conversations. But I think that what it allowed was more conversations and different types of connection, because now you no longer felt like you were crazy for having the conversation about how you get perceived a certain way or life has been a certain way. And it a lot of people who represent any type of group, whether it's your background or your gender or your sexual orientation or your abilities, anything, I think that you always feel this extra invisible weight to represent. And I think that for people who don't represent those types of communities, it's something that you don't really understand. And I think you have no existing frame of reference for unless you go out and you try to hear about other people's experiences and try to understand. And I think that it was so nice to have moments when I was there to be able to talk to people about, it's hard to carry the burden of being a Filipino person. What if I'm not Filipino enough? What if I'm not good enough? And I think that in many ways it helped to make us feel less alone. And then it also opened up the audience to a lot of new stories that they might not have seen before.
It was so impactful to see that. And then to see the support from some of the white cast members as well. Because as you say, if it's something you haven't personally experienced, I think it's really hard and it can be uncomfortable. But I thought that was a good thing, like that a lot of them, like I'm thinking of Xander and Heather, they kind of leaned into that feeling of discomfort and tried to learn more from those of you that were speaking up. So I thought it was such a powerful part of the season. And I wonder, this might actually tie into the next question here, because you have talked in some other interviews about having a breakdown right before the final tribal. And I think this kind of came as a surprise to a lot of people, because you were very composed at the actual tribal. So what were you struggling with in those moments before?
I think that going into final tribal, so Survivor fans know that in recent history, a woman hasn't won. So there hasn't been a woman winner in 5 years. And what we've also seen in recent Survivor history is when a woman is in the final three next to two men, the woman typically gets 0 votes. And so many women from the seasons that I've seen last year before, so many women have set out to change that. And so many women, so many capable, amazing women players wanted to break that curse. But then unfortunately, it didn't happen for them. So for me, I just felt so much of the pressure where I'm thinking it's not just about me right now. This is once again a chance for a woman to win, for a woman to prove that despite what we've seen in recent history, a woman can still come out on top. And it was something that I knew that the other two I was with, for better or for worse, didn't have to carry in with them. And I was thinking, I know that I've played a game that I'm really proud of. I know that I'm going to be capable of really arguing for myself at final tribal council. And why do I feel like this right now? Why do I feel like I'm afraid? And I think I was afraid that I was going to let so many people down. And I was afraid that so many people wanted something and I wasn't going to be able to bring it over the finish line. And then we'd have to wait a whole other season to see if a woman would bring it home this time. And then also the other two just seemed so confident. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, am I crazy? Because of course I'm confident, but then I have to think, okay, I need to be humble here. And I need to know that I have to fight for it. And I think that after really going over all of those feelings and crying it out, then I realized like, okay, I know I have what it takes to win. I know that I can best these two in this like crazy questioning environment, because that's essentially what I did in PR. I had to prepare people to be in hostile Q&A environments. So I thought, okay, I've cried it out, I've let it all out, and now I'm going to go in and kick some butt.
Wow. And obviously you did. You all, I mean, throughout the Q&A, you were very calm, very confident, also very genuine as people asked you about your strategy. I feel like there was this theme of a lot of the other players saying they wish they had played the way you had played. Was there anything there that surprised you, or any comments from your teammates that surprised you?
I think that when Danny said, I played the game that he wished that I played the game that he wished he played, and seeing everybody nod, I think it was that moment where I thought, wow, I have fared way better than I could have imagined. Because I think playing the game, I think it's really easy to get wrapped up in, okay, but then what is this going to look like on TV, or what is this going to look like? And I really tried to relieve myself of that, especially after Exile and smashing the hourglass and removing those expectations. And all I thought was, I just need to maneuver and make the moves I need to in order to get to tomorrow, and then get to tomorrow, because I thought all I need to do is get to the end and then argue my case. Because I think that there's a lot of people who are concerned with a lot of things, but if you don't make it to the end, it doesn't matter. And then I think that getting that validation from the rest of the players was something that I was so over the moon for. And I think I also, I think that it just validated that all of the decisions I made ended up being the right ones.
So somebody had submitted this question, which was there a moment when you felt like you might have this before, obviously before it was announced? So was this that moment for you did that happen before this?
It happened before this. Once we got into the final tribal council, there was a question that was asked to all of us. The first question was actually what Danny had asked about if the game was different quarters of I don't follow.
Yes, that's football, right.
But it was the football analogy. So that question, and he posed that to all three of us. And the other two were able to respond first. I was the last one to respond. And I saw the way that the jury responded to Xander. I saw the way they responded to Deshaun. And then I saw the way they responded to me. And the way that they responded to the other two was, I don't know, sometimes perplexed. I think that you could tell that they didn't fully agree with what the other two were saying. But for me, they were nodding along. And I was thinking, okay, I just have to stay with the course and I've got this. And then I think that seeing that the votes ended up the way they did, where it was such a commanding lead, like the 7-1-0, I was so proud of how I did at that last stretch.
Oh my gosh. And yes, you made like all of Canada proud as well. So, you're the first Canadian ever to win the show. You are the first woman, as you mentioned, to win in several seasons, the first person of Filipino descent to win Survivor ever as well. So what have you been hearing from people who are inspired by you and your win?
I've been so overwhelmed with positive messages, and I feel like I haven't been able to respond to them all. It's been impossible, but I'm so grateful and thankful to everybody who has reached out to me. I've honestly received a lot of crying selfie videos from people. So a lot of crying selfie videos from Filipino people or from Asian people, from a lot of women. And I think that for a lot of people, what resonated was that I was the underdog. I think that there was a lot of people who grow up and they don't see people like themselves winning on TV. I know I was certainly one of those people, and they finally had that moment where they felt like they could see themselves winning, or someone who looked like their family member winning. So it was a really validating and inspiring experience. And at the same time, I heard from a lot of women who responded really well to the analogy I made at Final Tribal Council about being treated like the intern, even though I was running the meeting. And I found out, I talked about a shared experience that a lot of people don't see talked about on TV. And even other audiences I wasn't expecting to hear from. I was hearing from PR folks and communications managers of all background, men and women, all sorts of different backgrounds. And they also really they also really related to when I talked about being treated like the intern, because I feel like sometimes people who work in communications have this place in organizations where they come in and they either make something sound good or they clean up a mess, but then they don't necessarily get to be at the decision-making table. So seeing me out there, in some ways, it validated their career and their profession. And I think that what I'm so proud of for my victory was that it wasn't just about me winning. I think that me winning allowed so many people who don't normally feel like they see themselves winning, they get to win too. And it's such an honor to be able to make people feel like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I imagine, I mean, as you're playing the game, you're not thinking about any of this, right? Like you're so focused on what you're doing. So was it overwhelming for you to feel this impact when you won, or when everyone found out you won, I guess?
Yeah. Oh, it's been overwhelming, and it's been really nice. I get stopped on the streets a lot. I think for me, the impactful ones are when I get stopped on the street and it's a family and the little kids talk to me. I didn't anticipate being so beloved by children. So even when the show was airing, I'd have little kids say to me that they were rooting for me and they wanted me to win. And I think that one really touched me, because as I said before, I started watching Survivor when I was a kid, and then look what happened now. The show made tangible impact on my life. And it's hard to wrap your head around potentially being that person for a kid.
How surprised were you when Jeff said they were going to announce the winner right then and there?
I was not ready for Jeff to make that announcement. When everybody went to vote, I was first losing my mind, because I was thinking, oh my God, I think I just won Survivor. I think I just won Survivor. I think I just won Survivor. And I was losing it. I think I was fidgeting. I was like rubbing the tops of my thighs. I was freaking out. I think you see me saying, oh my gosh, I can't believe that this is over. I couldn't believe that I'm pretty sure my dream had just come true. And then when Jeff said, we're going to do something different and read the votes right now, I wasn't ready for it. I don't know how to describe it, besides I was just overwhelmed. I wasn't ready for it. There was just too much that was happening. I was too overstimulated. And what the audience saw was just genuinely total like shock and excitement. I couldn't handle myself. And I think that for me, the even bigger surprise was when he said, okay, but we're going to do things different. And he went to throw to the after show. But then I'm thinking, there have been so many twists in this game. Is he going to make me do a game of chance? Is this going to be double or nothing? Am I going to miss out on this? Like, I was thinking the game is not over. Jeff is throwing something else at us. So I'm happy that the only thing he threw at us was pizza and champagne.
Yeah, it was really actually so really cool to see all of you in that moment. And that, I know he mentions that, like the reactions will be so raw because we're doing it right away. It's not like everyone has time to go home and like craft the responses to all the questions that are going to come up at this point. I thought it was really cool. And I thought you could really feel the genuine happiness from everyone on the jury that you had won as well. Is that what it felt like for you in the moment there?
Yeah, it was crazy. It was overwhelming because he read the votes. And we haven't seen this happen before. So I'm thinking, what am I supposed to do right now? What is going on? What's happening? And then after, when Jeff said, we're going to switch to the show, and said to the jury, okay, you can go and talk to them. And we ended up getting into pretty much a big group hug. And I think that it was a moment where we weren't competitors anymore. They were no longer the people I had to impress. Like, we could just have a human moment. And it was so nice to just feel like so many people were just so happy for me and for each other.
Yeah. Wow. I know we talked about how, we don't get to see everything as people who are watching the show unfold. So I wonder how you feel about the edit. Like, was there anything that you wish that you wish had been in there that wasn't?
Yeah, I feel like so many people ask me about my edit because I think that it's a non-traditional winner's edit. Normally, you kind of see the winner throughout different touch points of the game. And I think with this season, because there were 3 tribes, there were so many twists, the audience didn't really get to know me until episode 6 when I was exiled. And I think because of that, watching the show and knowing I had won, a lot of the hardcore fans, and not even the hardcore fans, I think a lot of fans had counted me out from being a contender because they hadn't seen me. So I think that watching the show, it's disappointing when I'm thinking I literally win. Why do people think that I have no shot? But at the same time, I feel like, I don't know, I feel like I continue to go back and forth about how I feel about the edit because of what they showed of me. I think it was really positive. I think that when I talk to my friends and family, they're so excited because they feel like people actually got to see my real personality on TV. Even a moment as small as when we were on Luvu, Deshaun's trying to make fire and he's struggling. And I said, no, keep going. You can do it. You can do it. I had friends tell me that that's actually what you're like. We're so happy that we were able to see that. So, I mean, and also it's a TV show and there's 18 people. So, I mean, it could have been fun to see more of Heather and I at the beginning, but at the end of the day, the show is part of the experience, and I'm very grateful for it overall.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's totally fair. And as you said, in these situations, I mean, there are always going to be things that that maybe you wish would have been shown differently. But I think the one thing that certainly speaks for itself is the fact that the jury voted for you 7-1. I mean, obviously, everyone who was with you for all of that time that we didn't see felt like you deserved to win. So I think that certainly says a lot. And speaking of winning, you won $1 million US dollars, which we all know goes a long way here in Canada. I know you said you wanted to first make sure your parents are taken care of, then buy some expensive shoes. So have you been able to do anything or enjoy your winnings yet?
Well, it's so weird because I'm at home just like everybody else in Ontario. And I've been trying to tell my parents I want to help them. And they're so stubborn. I feel like that is so typical of parents where they're like, no, don't give us anything. Like, just enjoy it. Just enjoy it. So, I've been able to buy like a couple things here and there for myself. But I think that the real fun with the money will come, once things open up. My parents have said to me, they don't want me to get them anything. The only thing they want is for our family to make a trip back to the Philippines once COVID is under control in the Philippines. So I'm like, okay, I can do that. If that's the one thing, you got this.
Oh, that's so nice. And what a great to have something like that to look forward to as a family. That's really cool. We talked about how you quit your job before you went on the show. So what's next for you?
Yeah, I think that after doing an experience like Survivor and realizing, okay, if under all of these crazy conditions, my actual lifelong dream can come true, then anything is possible. So I think that what I really want to do, there's a lot of things that are in the works and a lot of doors that have opened for me that I'm really excited about that I feel like I can't talk about quite yet. But I really want to return back to, that original girl who was really into pop culture, really interested in media and media production and storytelling. And I think using the platform that I have, thanks to the show and the voice that I have found for myself and figuring out how I can now bring stories that I think are interesting into the world.
Oh, I love that. We can't wait to see what you do next. Thank you so much for sharing your stories with us. It was such a pleasure to have Erika as a guest and to have Fansha as our sponsor for the event as well. We are going to have more of those live virtual events throughout the year. If you follow me on social media, I'm at Priya Sam. I'll be posting about them as they come up on Twitter, on Instagram, and on Facebook. In the meantime, if you enjoyed the show, we hope you'll leave us a 5-star review and follow the show on your favorite podcast app. You can also subscribe to us on YouTube. Thanks again for joining us. And until next time, take good care of yourselves and of each other.